Did you know that for this movie, Neil's house was a set built from scratch, consisting of 7 rooms and taking 5 months to complete? It ended up costing $100,000 to build, which angered Paramount executives and caused turmoil on the set. So Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a movie I watch every Thanksgiving. I have for the past several years, and I do not watch this movie outside of Thanksgiving. It is only once a year that I see this movie because it's become a tradition for me to watch this either Thanksgiving night or over the weekend if I'm not able to get to it on Thanksgiving because of all the craziness of family and football and eating and all that good stuff. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a very near and dear movie to my heart. I have 3 things about this movie that I really love, and my last thing is definitely my favorite. First thing I love about this movie is that the story is as crazy and ridiculous as it may seem. It's actually quite relatable. Director John Hughes actually took some inspiration for this story off of a personal experience of his. He had to go multiple routes of transportation to get back home one time, and so he drew from that real life experience for this movie's story. Of course, you add in all the stupidity and all the inconveniences to this movie. It's like, yeah, you can relate to it to a certain degree, but this movie is like inconveniences on steroids. Like it's to the point of just utter ridiculousness that Neil had to put up with just trying to get home to his family. We've all been there. Every single one of us can at least relate to just a tiny part of this movie, whether it's sitting next to a really annoying person on a flight or just trying to get home some route, bus, plane, train, taxi, like however that may be, or maybe you were rooming with someone, they were a slob. I mean, there are so many different ways that you can relate to this movie. This movie really makes it difficult to be thankful for things at times when you really think about all the stuff that Neil had to go through, especially putting up with Del's stupidity and just obnoxiousness. I mean, you feel for the guy in this movie, you really do. Second favorite thing about this movie was the performances. We got Steve Martin and John Candy, 2 legends. John Candy is my favorite comedian of all time, and he's gone too soon. I really wish he would have stuck around for the long haul, but he unfortunately didn't make it. He passed away a year before I was born at the age of 43. He was a big dude, and it was like, he was a big dude his whole life, but this movie is easily his best movie. And not just because he's just a hilarious guy. I mean, just so much improv, but a lot of just John Candy mannerisms that I just can't get over, man. Like, John Candy, man, like, I don't know if this movie won any awards, but in my book, John Candy won all the awards for his performance in this movie, not just the hilarious moments, but there were a couple serious moments in the movie that actually show that John Candy has some acting chops. Like, for the most part, John Candy is just that hilarious guy. Like, he's the guy to just, you know, take away from all the seriousness and just focus on how funny he is. But there's a moment that I'll get to later on this review that really just, it's a heartfelt moment, and I love seeing a little bit of a seriousness to John Candy because I don't see that in any of his other movies for the most part. But I just love the personality clash here. But just like, how can you stand a guy like this? Like, you can feel for Neil. Like, none of us would put up with a guy like Del. As annoying and inconvenient and just off-putting the character of Del is, there are some beautiful moments to be gleaned from this movie, and that's what I love about this. Like, as funny as it is, the seriousness of this movie is, Neil had so much to learn from Del. He had so much to learn, and he didn't have to talk all the time. Most of it, I would say, was just Neil listening to Del. Like, was he actually paying attention to what Del had to say? Because Del had some wisdom to give him. Del had some knowledge to give him. Del had gone through some crazy stuff in life, and Neil was always just so focused on himself. He just wanted to get home. The thing I love is learning from others who are so different from you. And if you have your mind closed off all the time, like, you can't learn anything from a person who's just completely different than you, then how do you expect to grow and change and maybe find something worthwhile out of a friendship or a relationship? It's just simply listening and learning from someone. Just shut your mouth and see what someone has to offer you. Like, I don't care if they dress weird, I don't care if they're obnoxious. Just sit back, listen, and just take it all in. And don't always look for ways of giving advice or a response. Just sometimes you just have to sit in quiet and silence and just process what they said to you, and it changes your heart. So, like, realizing there are people out there who are going through some real struggles, who are going through stuff that nobody knows about. Maybe some of their abnormalness that they have is kind of a front for how they really feel, how they're, that's how they kind of protect themselves, is a defense mechanism to open themselves up to really talk about their struggles and their heartbreak. Throughout the course of this movie, so much development, so much character development and story development, and then the ending of this movie it gets me every time. Them walking down the street, holding the treasure chest in the middle, and like Dell finally is home. Dell finally has a family at the very end, and that is just full circle. That is just a beautiful, beautiful way to end a movie that's been so chaotic. And then my favorite moment in the movie is the hotel scene where Neil is just fed up with Dell already, and Dell just bursts into this amazing speech for Neil. Like, this is the part of John Candy that I love to see, because you don't see this very often, and this is, in my opinion, it was an Academy Award dialogue where he just tells Neil, like, yeah, I know I'm all these things that you're saying I am, but that's who I am. Like, I'm the real deal. I'm not making any of this up. Like, either you get all of me or you get none of me. I'm not gonna change who I am. Like, I just love how Dell really stood on who he is and embraced everything, and just kind of was a wake-up call for Neil. Like, maybe Neil needs to be a little bit more aware of his words, aware of his actions, aware of just his self-control and how to just respond better, more gently, more kind. That scene is easily my favorite part of the movie, but I honestly think it's the best part in the movie. I think it really just sums up what this whole movie is all about, is accepting others for who they are. So if you haven't seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in a while, I highly recommend putting it on your watch list for Thanksgiving weekend, because it's such an amazing, hilarious movie. So for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 Mudflaps. Remember, leave me a thumbs up and drop it in the comments below. What is your favorite John Candy movie? See you next time.